Welcome to the interview. I'm Dan Hollander. Our guest today is Joe Baxter, the Lawrenceburg Director for Lawrenceburg Flood Control Project. Joe, good to have you with us.
Good to be here, Dan.
When did this flood control project actually get underway?
Well, it actually probably began just shortly after the flood, but you may have not seen actual construction work on building some kind of infrastructure that would handle our stormwater. But there was work going on to help get us to the point where we could start building. Obviously our first priority was taking care of the people who lost their homes in the flood, and we did 2 or 3 rounds of buyouts to clear the floodplains, and we spent quite a bit of time doing demolition work and getting the houses gone, and we built a couple of nice parks. We spent the first years out of that, but our first priority was doing the buyouts, and we started that in November, right after the flood occurred in July. So we didn't waste much time. And other things that were going on there, we started a very extensive study of the city of Lawrenceburg as far as their elevation and our drainage problems and where the stormwater goes, and evaluation of the system. And we worked with Corps engineers and an engineering group. Spent about a year on that, and that's really when the project began, in '99.
Now the first phase, I think there are a couple of phases. The first phase was the water detention ponds. That was what, back in 2003?
Well, we broke the flood project down into 3 phases. One of our immediate problems was the area south of the Murray manufacturing complex. You have about 90 acres under parking lot and roof right there, and if you were to build that today, in today's times and today's rule, they would have had a large detention facility to catch the runoff, because when you have just roofs and parking lots, it's going to come down the hill, and there's only really one drainage outlet for that whole neighborhood that goes under the railroad track over there by Frisbee Title and Escrow. This is the only drainage outlet for the North Military Rotary Park area. So everything that falls in this area has to get through this part. And this is one of the reasons we built the flood ponds, to take some of the water out of this. And one of our future improvements in the very near future, we're going to come in and shape this ditch out and put concrete walls and a bottom in it and get it where it'll work a little better and look a lot nicer. But the railroad tracks right over there, you can see that, and that acts like a dam going right through the middle of the town, and there's just not a lot of places for the water to get out. So this was one of the problem areas and bottlenecks we had that flooded this neighborhood in '98. The water basically couldn't get out, and it just pooled up and made a big lake here. But this is one of our few remaining loose ends for the flood project that we'll probably be doing in the next 6 months or so. We found it prudent to build a couple of large retention ponds with a pump station. They'll hold 17 million gallons of water, and of course the pumps start up instantly when the floats turn on, when they're starting to fill up, so it actually has a greater capacity than that, and that water is taken completely out of the North Military Basin. We pump it north and come out over there on Liberty Avenue, and it goes into Little Shoal Creek on the north side. So that water is completely removed from the Shoal Creek interceptor where we've had the problems. Well, this is the Liberty Avenue dissipator. It's a structure we built to reduce the impact of the storm drain water coming through here that's causing quite a bit of erosion in this ditch. This ditch goes down into Little Shoal Creek. It's where all the water from the flood ponds drained. And as you can see right there, we've just got a small 18-inch pipe that drains out the water from the flood ponds. That's the only water that comes from those 2 big ponds over there, and it takes about 24 hours to drain the ponds completely at that small array. Most of the water actually comes from the big ditches out there, and they also come here, and it's with such force we had to build these concrete structures here to slow it down, and it kind of comes out and slams against that and then goes around and stops some of the erosion we were having.
Then, as I understand it, the second phase was the box culverts. That was about 2005.
No, the second phase was another pond. It's a 7-acre pond adjacent to the railroad tracks behind the Department of Transportation and Taco Bell in that area. And it's just a grab and hold pond. It'll have 7 acres of water with 2 36-inch pipes to drain that out. And that also slows down the amount of water that's trying to get through that one drainage feature that crosses the highway there at Duncan's Market. So we wanted to further reduce the pressure on that particular part of the drainage system, which we adjudged was 10 times too small to handle the tapped water it was handling. Comes in through the railroad ditch right over there. It turns right over there. Comes around this way. So like I said, this is the beginning of the last phase of the flood project interceptor, which was called the upper box culvert project, and this is the last box that we laid right there.
You did save a considerable amount of money by using local workers, didn't you, Joe?
The old street superintendent loaned me about 3 or 4 of his guys, and we started doing work here and there. And then later on, we pointed out, hey, we can, if y'all buy some equipment, we can do this. And we just kind of grew into a flood control crew. We ended up getting 3 or 4 nice pieces of equipment and some dump trucks, and they just turned us loose. And like I said, we've used city workers for all of the excavation. We poured all the concrete ourselves, and we had one contractor primarily that did most of our work. Probably 3 foot deep of mud right here. It took us extra 3 or 4 weeks just to clean that out so we could get it good enough to pour concrete in. All we had up was our walls, and it was a mess, but that was about the only damage we had from a 9-inch rain in May of 2010. Of course, this is the work we just completed. This whole section was about 1,100 feet, and we did pretty much the last 900 feet in the last few months. And like I said, all the work that's left here to do is just get the banks leveled off and get the grass growing. But the concrete work is done here, and we're real proud to finally finish this up.
Will the possibility of flooding continue to be a threat in Lawrenceburg in the future, even though all this has been done?
There is nothing we can build that can totally withstand nature's strongest. I think you've seen South Carolina and Nashville. When the river gets full, or in our case, Shoal Creek, when the creek gets full, the water's going to quit running into it, and it's going to back up along those channels that it did in the '98 flood. The good thing we have is that almost every one of those houses that flooded in '98 are gone. It's just open, so we would definitely fare much better than we did in '98 simply because there's been clearance of those vulnerable areas. This is the first place we laid arch box culverts. It was a pretty demanding job. There were about 6 houses right here where this is, and that small box, which was only about 8 feet across, came down through here. And we had a pretty good elevation difference to solve. You see how we put the steps in to step down to make up for the difference of the elevation, and it looks pretty nice when water's falling over. It's kind of a waterfall effect. But this also is a holding area. The box drops down to 14 foot wide, crossing the football field till it widens back out at the end. So this is a surge area to kind of catch and hold the water and give it time to drain across and slow it down and reduce the impact downstream. Former alumni football field. I think the last game was played in 1986, and in 2003 we had a flood that damaged the existing box culvert that went across the field. It was right over there about where the walking track is, and it turned and went out that way. And it was only about 8 feet wide and about 5 feet tall. It was way too small, and that flood destroyed it, and we already had it on track to replace it. So, and part of what we wanted to do here is create a physical ed field for the school to use. They couldn't use it before because the old bleachers were a safety hazard, and the school board pretty much demanded to tear down the bleachers in exchange for the easement we needed to cross the football field. But we've tried to make it so it could be mowed, and it turned out really nice, and the school uses it all the time for physical education, and I think everybody's pretty pleased with it. We did put a sprinkler system in, and we sodded it with Bermuda, but it also is about probably 4 feet taller than it was originally. It's not as much of a pit. We had to do that so the banks could be mowed. This was the hardest hit area of the flood. We had a lot of houses flooded down here, and those were acquired through a FEMA grant program to clear the floodplains. And there's only a couple of houses left down here that got flooded in '98. One is owned by us as a park ranger residence, and the other is someone who declined the buyout. It was totally voluntary. We didn't force people out of the homes down here, but so they chose to stay. We've got one house down here, but we have a nice park, have a walking track and creekside picnicking and a campground for RVs, and we just took an area that's a very nice little nature spot. Well, you can see that little square hole on the right there where we poured that wall, but that was the original pipe that used to try to drain Lawrenceburg's water. Of course, you can see how much bigger the one on the left that we put in is. It's much larger and much more capable of handling Lawrenceburg stormwater. The third phase was the hardest and most costly and time-consuming. We called it the Shoal Creek Interceptor. It was about a $7.5 million section of the flood project, the most expensive part, and it was 2 miles of channel, and it started south of the football field, and it had to go all the way north and come around Duncan's Market and cross the street, North Locust, over there to where Mapco Express was, and that's where the railroad ditch runs into it. So that's that one outlet I was telling you about that gets out of North Military, but there's a lot of ribs that go into that backbone from First Street and different places. All the water drains into that backbone, and that's what we've just now finished. I call it the 7-year ditch because we set our first box culvert right there on the south side of East Gaines, there where the old pyramid was. That was the very first thing we did, and in 2008, and we've come back to that point with our concrete channel going down there. So it took 7 years. This is Shoal Creek, and it's hard to imagine that the water got high enough to get into that house right there, but it did. And Mickey Dunn lived right here at this place where those campers are, and water was 6 feet deep in his house. It was up over the door facing. So, but like I said, we don't have to worry about those houses being flooded now. All we got to worry about is getting the campers to move on out if we've got water getting up, and that has happened at least once. We've had to have them move one time. We've increased our stormwater capacity 10 times of what it was. I went back through some old photos this morning, and I saw there's pictures in there showing the old pipe, and it was maybe a 60 or a 72-inch pipe, and of course we're a lot larger than that now. I will not guarantee you that that a 19-inch rain would not cause some flooding. But like I said, if the creek gets full, all bets are off. It's going to back up, but like I said, we've got a lot of things out of the way. I think we'll do well.
Appreciate it, Joe. Thanks for being with us. And we thank you for joining us for the interview. I'm Dan Hollander.